The brain hormones that we need for mental health and for all health are supposed to be made in the gut. This is where we produce these hormones naturally that help to feed the brain for all of our mental operations and all of our health operations. Inside the brain, these neurotransmitters, these hormones slash neurotransmitters, will operate to help stabilize the brain in all of its different types of functions. This works inside through the synaptic cleft, where there are literally trillions and trillions and trillions of these little synaptic clefts, tiny little microscopic things, where the neurotransmitter is released, then reabsorbed, and this is how functions happen. An electrical stimulus causes this release of the neurotransmitter, then it's reabsorbed. Now, serotonin, our happy hormone, GABA, the stress reduction hormone, dopamine, motivation, pleasure, oxytocin, bonding, all of these very, very essential hormones are made in the gut by the bowel flora. And we need fiber for this. And here we have inside the synaptic cleft. The synaptic cleft were these tiny little neurotransmitters, these chemicals, all in the space of about an angstrom, very tiny, 10 to the minus 8. In fact, the synaptic cleft is so small that it actually falls under quantic law, quantic principles, if we apply Heisenberg uncertainty principle. We published this about the Promorpheus back in 1982, showing that the action of the synaptic cleft was not a thermodynamic, but yet a quantic process, making it much more difficult to understand. And we're going to find that this inside here, this is where the action happens, as an electrical stimulus will come down and cause the release of the synaptic cleft to release its neurotransmitter. The neurotransmitters are stored in the presynaptic vesicle, and then with an electrical signal from the nerves, they can be caused to be released to find their destination in the postsynaptic density. Now, this is how the action of all these nerves takes place. This is the action of the neurotransmitters that are stimulated through a quantic electrical process. And this whole process is so small that it takes place under quantic law, quantic function. Then the neurotransmitter is reabsorbed back into the original part of the synaptic cleft, the transmission end. Biology does not waste any action. So not only is there stimulation of the neurotransmitter being received and stimulated, but the reabsorption is also a biological process. The reabsorption is another biological process, the process of grounding or reality check. It's called reuptake, this process of reabsorbing. All these little neurons have electrical actions of firing, but then the chemical actions, these chemicals, are made in the gut. Now we can see that there is a reabsorption of the serotonin. Biology does not waste any process. This reabsorption is also triggering events that are part of the balance and the homeostasis regulation. It's not just reabsorption, but it actually stimulates a type of reality check, a place where people can now find out what's really happening in their bodies. But chemical companies have found that certain people who have depression, see, serotonin is our happy hormone, and in order to block the reabsorption, they made a chemical. See, drug companies are always trying to block function using unnatural synthetic compounds. Rather than balance the gut flora, they seek to try to find synthetic chemical means of stabilizing. So what they did is they made formulas like Prozac, a host of other things, MAO inhibitors, which block the reabsorption. Here we see the neurotransmitter, serotonin, firing, producing the happy. Certain people don't have enough, so what they do is the chemical companies have made blockers. The chemical companies are blocking the natural process of the reabsorption. this upsets the reality check process. The chemical companies are more concerned with their profit and treating a symptom rather than treating the whole body. And they made many mistakes by blocking, substituting, inhibiting, and suppressing nature. See these little chemicals, these little white balls, ping pong balls, that's a chemical. It blocks the reuptake, so the serotonin lasts longer inside the synaptic cleft, producing a little more happiness. However, when they're blocking a natural process, does that natural process have other things that it does rather than just reabsorption? What happens? Because as we block this, we're blocking the reabsorption. This reabsorption of the serotonin has a biological function. It's called the reality check. This is how you check your reality, the reabsorption. But when we block this, we no longer can do this reality check. Serotonin is released, we have a good night, we have sex, we have alcohol, we have all these other things. And after that, in the morning, when we reabsorb the serotonin, we have our reality check. When you can't do your reality check, you see, guns don't kill people. Crazy people on doctor-prescribed drugs kill people because they can't do their reality check when they're taking these antidepressants, these serotonin reuptake blockers. They can no longer check their reality. So they start to make different crazy ideas. And the drug companies, because they're upsetting the natural process, and rather than make the hormones in the gut, they try to make the hormones in the laboratory, then sell them at profit motives. When they use these drugs, and many other types of drugs, oftentimes they use drugs that overdo. They do drugs because there's too much firing in the synaptic cleft. Or you could have street drugs that create too much firing in the synaptic cleft. Then what we have is sometimes we need to block those. There's another place where the chemical companies are trying to block function rather than balance function. They need to turn on the balancing hormones. And oftentimes use of cocaine and use of bath salts, the methcathinone, and all these other things can damage the synaptic cleft. They can actually damage receptor sites. You can see it here. They're damaging this, destroying the receptor sites, creating problems inside the brain, inside the synaptic cleft, leading to drug burnout. People will now get massive drug burnout and lose the ability to operate in the world. In order to help these people, we have to get to the gut flora, the bowel flora, and balance that. But we have to learn a lot more about our bowel flora and our needs for fiber.
Your microbiome is nourished by meals like this, rich in soluble fiber, also referred to as resistant starch. Soluble fiber can't be digested by your body, but instead becomes food for your gut bacteria. Most starch is easily digested. Starch is dissolved in the small intestine and then absorbed by your body, providing you with energy and nutrients. The remaining non-digestible portion is called resistant starch or soluble fiber. The soluble fiber continues its journey through your gut and arrives at the large intestine. We see that the soluble fiber has become exposed to the healthy bacteria of the gut microbiome. This species of bacteria specialize in breaking down soluble fiber. This breakdown process provides the bacteria with the fuel they need to survive. As they use the soluble fiber for energy, they release small carbohydrate molecules. The neighboring bacteria feed on these carbohydrates. As the bacteria feed, they excrete even smaller molecules as waste. One of the final waste products is called butyrate, an energy source for your body. As the butyrate builds up, it is absorbed by the large intestine. The presence of butyrate encourages blood to flow into the vessels of the large intestine, keeping the tissue healthy. If your diet includes enough soluble fiber, these cells will use butyrate as their main source of energy. Here, we can see the molecular surface of one of the intestinal cells. The surface is covered in special proteins that actively pump butyrate molecules into the cell. Once inside, they can be harvested for energy. In addition, butyrate has other benefits. Intestinal cells are sensitive to DNA damage caused by toxic foods and artificial ingredients. This cell's DNA has been damaged, resulting in a mutation. More damage could accumulate over time as the cell divides, which could lead to colon cancer. But a steady supply of butyrate allows the damage to be more easily detected, and the cell can activate a suicide program in response. Because the damaged cell destroys itself, it can't progress to form a cancer. A starved microbiome is unable to protect you from cancer. By eating foods rich in soluble fiber-resistant starch, you can nourish your microbiome and improve your health.
When bacteria digest fiber, they produce short-chain fatty acids that nourish the gut barrier, improve immune function, and can help prevent inflammation, which reduces the risk of cancer.
The fiber that we're talking about comes from the cell walls of the plant cells. Animal cells have a soft membrane. When you eat meat, it's more easy to digest. You don't get that fiber. The fiber comes in from the cell walls of plants. And we need to have the whole cell